They were there at the start.
I will never consider our presence in Afghanistan a failure.
It's hard to say whether the mission was accomplished in total.
Now at the end, U.S. military veterans and the families of the fallen reflect on America's longest war.
I get asked, was it worth it?
A Veterans Day view from the home front on the legacy of the war in Afghanistan. Now, on the Inside Story, Mission's End. Hi, I'm VOA Midwest correspondent Kane Fairbaugh reporting from the Middle East Conflicts Memorial Wall in Illinois. Veterans Day, which initially marked the armistice that ended World War I in 1918, is a federal holiday observed every November 11th, honoring U.S. military veterans for their service to the nation. This is the first Veterans Day since the end of the war in Afghanistan, the longest conflict in U.S. history. Here in Marseilles, Illinois, the names of more than 2,400 American men and women who died serving in Afghanistan are a permanent reminder of the cost of the war and the sacrifices made. Etched in these black panels are the names of thousands more Americans who died in other flashpoints in the Middle East, including Iraq. But in 2002, this memorial didn't exist. There were no U.S. forces on the ground in Iraq, and fewer than 10,000 U.S. service members were committed to fighting terrorism in Afghanistan. That's when I traveled there, towards the beginning of the conflict, just months after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, meeting up with some of the first men and women serving in Operation Enduring Freedom. The U.S. military had been in Afghanistan just a few months when I landed at Bagram Airfield in May of 2002 on a reporting assignment for the American Forces Network.
Major Brian Cole with the United States Army Reserve and the 489 Civil Affairs Battalion.
I met Brian Cole while distributing supplies at a recently reopened school shut down by the Taliban prior to the U.S. invasion.
Welcome to the land of the giants sometimes.
In the remote village of Karbagh Bazaar, which, we were told, had just been cleared of landmines.
Because when we write letters home, we tell them that the people of Afghanistan need school supplies.
I look at what we're doing as an extension of our foreign policy of having the people come back from Pakistan and Iran back into Afghanistan. And if we're going to have the people come back, then we need to assist them once they get here to help them get established.
That same day, Cole delivered food to another remote village, all part of the U.S. military strategy to win the hearts and minds of the Afghan people.
And what we're doing by bringing the school supplies and the food now is we're serving as a stopgap until the non-governmental organizations can get here, until they can start taking over our mission.
Thank you. You're welcome.
It's been more than 19 years since I met Cole in Afghanistan.
How y'all doing?
After some effort tracking him down, I learned he safely returned home. We reconnected in July at Fort Boonesboro, outside Lexington, Kentucky.
I'm a state park ranger now, and I have like a phobia against trash, because that's one thing they were doing. They would take MRE boxes and put explosives in it, or just roadside trash would all of a sudden become a mine.
Despite the risk, Cole felt his unit's objectives were clear.
Our mission was to help two things: to gain support for us being there, and to put in water wells and things like that, and to help gain acceptance with the U.S. forces being there. And then also the bigger picture was to help gain support for the newly established Afghan government.
Cole believes the big picture lost focus when the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003.
You can only have one main effort, and we tried to have two main efforts, and I think we took our eye off the ball when we did that.
The war in Afghanistan took a personal toll on Cole.
Show me 97 to the boat ramp.
His daughter was just a month old when he deployed, and his absence was difficult for his family back in Kentucky.
My wife, she never accepted me going, and we never recovered from that, and I ended up divorced.
Cole says he made sacrifices to build a better Afghanistan, but that mission was never accomplished.
I think a better way to say it is the mission's over.
Cole says the legacy of the U.S. military in Afghanistan is best measured by what didn't happen.
We were able to keep similar 9/11 attacks from occurring, and I think they would have had we not gone. You know, the training camps would have flourished even more so.
Which is why he feels the U.S. military should have stayed in Afghanistan, pointing to forces stationed in countries like Germany and Japan since World War II has a precedent.
If you leave too soon, you're back too early.
Cole has since retired from the U.S. Army. He says he has few regrets about his service in Afghanistan, but one is losing contact with his Afghan interpreter.
How you did? I'm hoping I can track him down and maybe serve as a sponsor for him back here if he's able to come to the United States.
Why?
I loved him. I mean, he kept us safe.
And he was with you every day?
Right.
By your side?
Yep. Literally by my side.
Was it hard for you to leave him?
It was. I remember telling him, I was like, don't let these guys get you killed, man.
Cole credits his interpreter with saving the lives of his fellow soldiers and his own. What will you do if you can get him here?
Give him a place to live.
How do you think he would appreciate that?
Oh, he'd love it. We talked about that. We talked about him coming to the United States.
Cole still didn't know the status of his Afghan interpreter as the U.S. military presence in Afghanistan neared its conclusion, culminating in the chaotic exodus of tens of thousands aboard planes departing the Kabul airport.
So I'm hoping that he's able to come with a program to bring him to the United States. We definitely need to bring them back and keep them safe. We owe that to them.
My assignment to Afghanistan in 2002 was to understand the conditions and motivations of service members who were spending their first 4th of July holiday after 9/11 in Afghanistan, trying to rout the al-Qaeda terrorist network.
Meanwhile, an Air Force B-52 was also in the area on a planned mission to bomb suspected Taliban and al-Qaeda locations.
My friend and American Forces Network colleague, Staff Sergeant Dan Milbauer, accompanied me on our first experience in a combat zone.
When you come into the country the way we did in a military aircraft and under cover of darkness to avoid being shot at and landing in a corkscrew kind of pattern, you know, that's kind of when it first hits you that, oh yeah, this is real. You know, we are going into harm's way.
At the time, nearly 10,000 U.S. forces were in harm's way, many based at Bagram Airfield, which was quickly growing into one of the largest U.S. military facilities in the world. It's where Rhonda Lawson served with a U.S. Army Mobile Public Affairs Detachment, or MPAD, which hosted us in Afghanistan.
I'm a print journalist by trade.
To keep U.S. troops there informed, her team produced a base newspaper and other products.
We run stories not just here at Bagram, but also stories from Kabul. Every once in a while we might get a story from Kandahar or from Uzbekistan. What I took pride in doing was telling the soldier story. We talked about the mission, but at the same time, I wanted people to know that our soldiers were real people. Our soldiers had families. Our soldiers had feelings.
U.S. troops also received messages from back home showing passionate support for their mission.
One of the cards that I got, it just said kick bin Laden's ass on it. You know, so there was that sense that we needed to get revenge.
But finding bin Laden took nearly a decade. Neither Lawson nor others we spoke to during our 2002 visit
It's like a long-ass camping trip.
thought operations in Afghanistan would become the longest in U.S. history.
Desert Storm, a lot of the fighting ended in about 6 weeks. I think people thought that this was going to be quick, like Desert Storm.
Of course, obviously, a lot of us thought that any operations around 9/11 response would be temporary or quick.
As the war in Afghanistan dragged on, Milbauer returned to the country a second time in 2003 to work with a psychological operations or PSYOP unit.
It's really kind of trying to, I guess, strategically put out information.
Milbauer says he noticed some things had changed when he returned to Bagram Airfield.
There was more activity, more people there, and then I think more coalition partners had forces there.
And working in Afghanistan was more dangerous, says Milbauer. He vividly remembers a close call during a mission to support a remote Afghan radio station.
I heard this whistling of an RPG coming in, so it passed over my head.
No one was injured, says Milbauer. For him, the constant threat of attack didn't change his outlook on U.S. military objectives, including helping locals to have a better life.
Some of the things we did was to provide them with clean water sources and lots of money to improve their lives. So in that regard, I was behind that all the way.
Milbauer and Lawson were two of more than 775,000 U.S. forces who served at least one deployment to Afghanistan since 2001. Despite the country now falling back into the hands of the Taliban, Lawson, who retired from the U.S. Army in 2017, believes the U.S. effort was not in vain.
I will never consider our presence in Afghanistan a failure.
It's hard to say whether the mission was accomplished in total.
Milbauer, who left the military in 2007, feels the U.S. reached the point of doing all it could in Afghanistan.
We've found and eliminated Osama bin Laden. I think after 20 years, it's probably time to get out of there and let them try to take care of themselves the best they can.
Many Afghans are now worried about how they will be treated by the Taliban, who took control of most of the country as U.S. forces pulled out of Afghanistan, ending America's longest conflict.
Well, we're here at Kabul International Airport, where we've been following the trail of...
My first visit in 2002, reporting for the American Forces Network from the newly liberated capital city of Kabul, Afghanistan.
Top jump master.
Started in U.S. Army Major Patrick Flanagan's military Humvee as we departed Bagram Airfield. The 2-hour ride in a small convoy on a 60-kilometer stretch of highway cut through the remote countryside and brought Flanagan and his unit into contact with foreign troops, Northern Alliance fighters, and wary Afghan citizens.
I remember the first couple rides into Kabul, they say, "Oh, you're with the killers." And I'm like, "The killers?" They says, "No, we're here to protect the city. You're here to kill the Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, the bad people."
That perception didn't meet the reality of this day's mission.
When the United States Army Psychological Operations teams go into stores like this one in Kabul, they've got several things in mind.
Our journey led us to Kabul's famed Chicken Street, where Flanagan's objective
2,
was to shop.
3.
We're buying some school supplies, purchasing them to take them back up to our area in order for us to give them to the locals. And what we're going to do is give them to the local leaders in order to have them promote that, again, they're in charge of their schools and they want to take care of the pupils as well as the teachers that are working hard to support the education effort for Afghanistan.
4, 8.
Delivering school supplies along with leaflets and other material labeled with slogans and messages was part of Flanagan's U.S. Army Psychological Operations, or PSYOP mission.
It's the military's form of influence, and it'd be like if you hired a marketing campaign to sell Coca-Cola.
Flanagan says the intent of PSYOP wasn't to mislead or indoctrinate, but to educate and protect.
It's not so much taking information, trying to use it for or against the population, but an appreciation, understanding of what they're going through, so we can use the themes and symbols and messages to better assist themselves as well as the coalition forces.
Don't step on IEDs or report if there's an unexploded ordnance. So some of them was just to inform them because it could hurt them, and others is like, you know that the coalition, you shouldn't throw rocks at their trucks, or the coalition are friendly. So a whole series of messages designed to help them understand why we're here, so they wouldn't have someone else to answer that question for them that really didn't like us.
Today, remnants of Flanagan's PSYOP mission are stored in his rural Virginia basement.
This is many hands.
Memories of Afghanistan, where he lived and worked for a total of 2 years over multiple deployments, supporting a mission he sees today as incomplete.
And I think at times, because of some of our actions, we've hardened the people that don't like us. So I think it was polarizing, not to our effect for psychological operations, but I think it extenuated. People that were just living in the farms, working, they're like, okay, yeah, we like this, we're getting a little help. But then they were agitated by the Taliban, who say, we don't want you to help them. So they would think of new ways to cause havoc and chaos and pain, because they also wanted to win the hearts and minds to get people. So now you have this struggle.
Flanagan retired from the Army in 2011 and has spent time since working for a U.S. military contractor. Through his brother, former Illinois Congressman Michael Flanagan, now a Washington, D.C. consultant, he had opportunities to share his views on his time in Afghanistan with other legislators and policymakers.
I think we should have left a while ago. I think we overextended our stay.
Flanagan feels the U.S. achieved its goal of breaking up Osama bin Laden's terrorist operations in the country, but lost the effort to nation build in Afghanistan.
Hindsight's 20/20, but yes, I think we should have said, okay, he's done now. Where's Al-Qaeda? And let's have some sort of ramp off the military can exit.
Flanagan wants a parade or celebration marking the return of U.S. forces back home.
Just to say thank you very much, and then when that's over, it kind of finalizes it and it's done. You can look back and say, okay, that's finished.
But Flanagan hopes to serve the public again. He is seeking opportunities to run for political office, where he hopes to use the experience he gained in Afghanistan while in uniform
Because we're going to get a lot of stuff.
to shape future U.S. foreign policy.
I'm going to write it in one of these books just so I keep track of all this, and then we'll make it right. And I'll buy this, but okay, sharpen there.
After September 11th, I knew eventually it was going to be a matter of time before we were going to get called up to perform our duties as necessary as guardsmen.
Lawrence Taylor worked as an air traffic controller in San Jose, California on September 11th, 2001. Just 4 months later, he was among the first uniformed members of the military on the ground at Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan.
When we showed up, the tower itself, it wasn't in the best condition. The floor was all damaged. The ceiling had a mortar hole in it. We came here with basically nothing, and we set up an air traffic control facility from the ground on up.
The last place Master Sergeant Taylor expected to find himself.
When I first met Taylor in May of 2002, serving with the U.S. Air National Guard in Afghanistan, flight operations at Bagram Airfield had picked up pace. Most serving at the time of my reporting assignment were part of Operation Enduring Freedom, the military's official name for the mission to eliminate the al-Qaeda terrorist network that used Afghanistan as a haven to launch attacks.
As a guard unit going out and doing this stuff, this is the first time that we've ever done this.
Archer 564 negative contact, 2-way comms with traffic.
Steve Hutcherson was working the radar system at an aviation facility in St. Joseph, Missouri during the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks.
How's our flash doing? Is he getting ready to launch?
When I visited him in a radar trailer near the flight line of Bagram Airfield in 2002, he had been in country nearly 5 months.
You're a part of it. You're not just watching it on TV and now you're over here and actually, part of, getting things straightened out. I don't know, it's a pretty patriotic thing. Reach 84 radar contact.
Hutcherson's first combat deployment wasn't his last.
Was home for about 6 months, and then we got the call again, and we got to go over to Iraq and spend a little bit of time over there.
It wasn't hard to track down Hutcherson 19 years after we first met. He still works for the same air traffic control squadron in Missouri he deployed with in Afghanistan and Iraq. Only now, he's a civilian with the unit after retiring from the Air National Guard.
People in now, they've known nothing but Afghanistan, and nothing had really changed since when we first went in there and we took control of the areas and everything.
Hutcherson says he wasn't surprised by the rapid advance of the Taliban in regaining control of Afghanistan.
I would have been more surprised if we watched the news and saw the Afghan army fighting the Taliban. That would have shocked me much more.
But Hutcherson doesn't believe the end result changes the success of the mission.
The mission was to stop another 9/11 style attack. And it's been 20 years since it happened, and we haven't had one. And really, honestly, I don't think most of us think about terrorism anymore. We're so divided right now amongst ourselves that we've forgotten about international terrorism.
For me, it was more personal than political. Just because of the fact that I felt like I had an obligation to do something, and that's why I was there.
19 years after I met him in the control tower at Bagram Airfield, Taylor invited me to visit with him at his suburban Chicago home.
I think when I showed up there, it might have been a little over 100, but when I left, I think there might have been about 8,000 people, maybe 9,000.
Taylor served in Afghanistan for almost a year, also later deploying to Iraq.
This was the unit, the F-15 unit out of Oregon.
Before retiring, he received one of the highest honors in the U.S. Air Force, the Air National Guard Senior Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year Award. Today, he works for the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, and watched the fall of the Afghan government and the loss of U.S. strategic resources, including Bagram Airfield, unfold in recent weeks.
I thought we'd be there forever.
Taylor says the current circumstance in Afghanistan does little to change the way he views how he and his fellow military members served their country.
Me, I'm glad I got to go. At the time, I think it was worth it. I still do, but I'm sure I would get a good argument from a lot of people.
It's an argument that policymakers, politicians, historians, and voters will also debate for decades to come, as the U.S. involvement in Afghanistan closed amid the chaotic and dangerous evacuation of tens of thousands of U.S. citizens, troops, and their allies at the Kabul airport.
Is the mission accomplished, or is it simply over?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, I think that would be something more for, like you said, the taxpayers to answer, the politicians. And I went there for, my reasons and my perspective and what I felt was right. To look back on it, I think that's something that other people would need to, I'll let them decide.
So far in this program, we've heard directly from veterans who served. They are some of the more than 750,000 Americans who deployed at least once to Afghanistan. More than 20,000 were wounded. More than 2,400 never returned. Those are the names which are etched on these panels.
This is not a legacy and a reminder of death to me. This is a reminder to the living that everything you have was purchased with these names, with these lives.
Denise Williams is a regular visitor to the Middle East Conflicts Memorial Wall along the banks of the Illinois River near Marseilles, Illinois.
This memorial represents those who have died since 1967 in all Middle East conflicts. People forget we lost 3 soldiers in the Yom Kippur War in 1967. The infamous Black Hawk Down in Mogadishu, they're here. USS Cole, they're here. So it's not just post 9/11 here. It's all Middle East conflicts.
But there is one name on these walls closest to Williams' heart. Her son's, Andrew Meary.
It's comforting that my son is with his brothers and sisters where he needs to be, where he should be, where he chose to be, that his name will be remembered.
Private First Class Andrew Meary was deployed with the Army's 101st Airborne Division in southern Afghanistan during the U.S. troop surge in 2010, when a suicide bomber on a motorcycle detonated a device near his outpost. One of the soldiers with Meary that day, Sergeant Felipe Pereira, later recalled the incident in a video produced by the U.S. Defense Department.
I run down the hill even further. That's when I got to PFC Miari, and the soldier just turns up to me, Specialist Thorne just turns up to me and says, "Man, he's dead. He's gone. He's gone."
Andrew Meary was just 21 years old when he was laid to rest on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2010, near his home in Illinois. Meary visited his mother on leave just weeks before he died. Williams says even then, he never wavered in his understanding of the mission to eliminate terrorist threats in the country.
He absolutely believed if we were not fighting them there, we would be fighting them here. He believed in what he was doing. He believed in the righteousness of it.
Williams views that objective in Afghanistan as a success. Osama bin Laden was captured and killed less than a year after her son's death.
Everything else that we did in Afghanistan, while there's many noble causes, there's many noble ideas, that's not what a war is about. That's not what soldiers are for. Soldiers don't dig wells and build schools, and my son participated in some of that. That's not the purpose of soldiers.
Today, Williams represents Illinois Gold Star Mothers as the nonprofit service organization's president.
We are the mothers of those who have lost their child or children because of their decision to put on this nation's uniform.
As the United States marks the first November 11th Veterans Day after the end of the war in Afghanistan, a date which also marks exactly 11 years since she buried her son, Williams answers a difficult question she is often asked.
I get asked, well, was it worth it? There is no such thing as their child's death being worth it to a mother's heart. Period. But my son didn't fight for the Afghan people. He did not fight for a political party. He did not fight for anything other than the Constitution, the oath that he swore. He fought for the American people, for America. America's worth fighting for.
Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Inside Story. I'm Kane Fairbaugh. Connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at VOA News. You can also stay up to date online at voanews.com. See you next week on the Inside Story.